Good to be with you. Thanks,
We're going to talk about the old guard in a bit. But first, happy birthday.
Thank you. Good to be.
What birthday is it?
42.
42.
How old do you feel?
Starting to get up there.
Get out of there. Security, there's a crazy man at the table.
Well, I will say this. I spent much of the last year back at Arlington National Cemetery researching sacred duty with the soldiers of the old guard. And a lot of those soldiers, to include those tomb sentinels, are 19 or 20 years old.
They didn't make it.
So I do feel a little old
Yeah.
when I'm back at the cemetery and back in Fort Myer with the soldiers of the old guard.
Senator, I want to ask you about the trade negotiations that are going on right now. There was just recently a University of Arkansas study from your home state that said retaliatory tariffs by China could end up hurting many farmers in your state. Is President Trump hurting the Americans that he promised to help?
So these tariffs are going to end up hurting both Chinese and some Americans, I'll grant you that. I think they'll ultimately hurt the Chinese more than they will Americans, in part because Chinese companies and their government have been cheating the United States for so long. There will be some sacrifice on the part of Americans, I grant you that. But I also would say that sacrifice is pretty minimal compared to the sacrifices that our soldiers make overseas, that our fallen heroes who are laid to rest in Arlington make, that are right about in sacred duty.
You can't compare those two sacrifices.
That's right. And then when I'm home in Arkansas, I hear from farmers who are worried about opening up new markets and getting their products to market. But they also understand that China is a serious competitor to the United States and wants to displace us around the world. And they look at the sacrifices that soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines make around the world, and they are willing to bear some of those sacrifices in the short term to hopefully in the long term ensure our long-term prosperity and security.
Why not tell them that on the front end? Why not tell them this sacrifice and the higher prices you'll receive, you're going to have to pay, are a part of this conflict, as opposed to saying what's not true, which is that China's going to pay these tariffs to the Treasury?
Well, China will ultimately be paying a price for these because Americans may be shifting their consumption or their investment decisions away from Chinese products that have oftentimes been dumped in the United States. We have Arkansans who are benefiting from these tariffs as well. In eastern Arkansas, we have one of the largest steel production areas now in the country. They obviously are doing very well. Again, I'm not going to say that no one is going to make a sacrifice, but in the long term, the effort is to make sure that the United States remains preeminent as a global superpower, both in the economic and the security.
But in dollars and cents, it seems to translate between $700 to $1,000 for the average American family, which is a lot for many families. Is it worth that cost?
If we remain the world's largest economy and the world's dominant superpower in the short term, I say it is worth that cost. And what I hear from most Arkansans is that they are willing to bear a short-term price